Hi, everybody. This is Heather Lockwood, Lasting Conversations, and I have Valerie Staggs with us today. Hey, Valerie.
Hi. Happy Saturday, everyone.
It's really great to have you with us. We are Zooming in today. I'm in a studio location where people are busy doing their thing and working diligently. And Valerie has an amazing background. For those of you who can't see it yet, it's of a huge construction site. And so Valerie's main business right now is she is the founder of organization called Take On Trades. And this has to do with connecting people for the trade industry to companies and employers that desperately need the help. So, but this seems like a really, really important conversation to be having these days. So welcome again, and tell us about yourself and what you are doing with Take On Trades.
Well, thank you. And I'm just really happy to be here. I've been listening to this podcast for a while and find your conversations amazing and the people, so interesting. So I'm glad to be one of them.
Thanks so much.
So Take On Trades, I've been working on for a number of years. My background is in marketing and advertising. And so for 21 years, I ran a marketing firm. And I came across this issue several years ago because a lot of my clients were trade-based types of companies. And I was helping them with their marketing. And what they were telling me was, I would love to spend more money in marketing and get more customers, but I have no employees. I can't find people to actually fulfill the work.
Right.
So I looked at this as a challenge kind of for me, and selfishly, like if I could get them more workers, they would spend more money in marketing and I would make more money. So,
well, there's the synergy of it
right?
all. The synergy of it all, yes.
Exactly. So that's kind of where it emanated from.
Well, and there has been this call from, and maybe we can get into if you happen to know why or what it is. And I know it definitely has a lot more to do with, people were getting subsidies. There seems to be a seismic shift on how people work, how people want to work, what even the employers, that there's just been so many changes, the IBMs of the world that you would be grandfathered in and taken care of. You work for them for 30 years, they will take care of you the rest of your life. Those things don't happen anymore. No. So everything has changed. The one thing that has not changed, and I know here in Florida and other places, what it really comes up, that we forget that when the proverbial shit hits the fan and there's a storm or something, you want people with chainsaws, and you want trucks, and you want hard hats, and you want boots, and you want leathered hands, and the wisdom and knowledge of electricians and plumbers and ditch diggers and the hard manual work. So tell us more again. And I'm looking at a construction zone. We need people to safely build the buildings. Anybody can slap up a building, sure, but we need to have the knowledge and wherewithal to safely put up those buildings and have the huge team of people to do that. So how are you I will add one more thing, and it did come across on my road trip that I was having. People in the restaurant fields, people everywhere. The restaurants and businesses truly are feeling the lack of folks showing up. And, then there are signs on some doors saying, listen, please, if you're having a bad day, please don't take it out on the people who have shown up today. Just come in for your coffee. Let's smile and engage with each other. If you're having a bad way, don't yell at the folks who have shown up. Exactly. So how is this working for you, and how are you making these connections to have people know that joining a trade and having training in this is actually a fantastic career?
Yeah, so what has happened with trade industries and the whole conversation about careers in the trades, it's kind of a three-pronged issue. So the first piece of that has to do with what has happened in the educational system.
Right.
And that goes back to like the 1980s when the funding for education changed because the initiative, as well-meaning as it was to fund academic in schools that related to math, science, and English.
Right.
And the intention was to raise up, people within the school systems that maybe were of a lower income or had not had opportunities in the academic world that might bring them to college and higher paying careers. And then subsequently in the early 2000s, we had No Child Left Behind, which further funded those programs. But the downside of that was that translated into loss of programs in career and technical education in schools. So my older brother, is 57. He's a auto mechanic. He always wanted to be an auto mechanic. He learned to be an auto mechanic in high school because we used to have those programs.
I was just going to say there used to be vocational programs. And in some ways there are some magnet schools, but in general, the wide swath of budgetary cuts in education cut out home ec and wood shop and all those vocational types of things.
Yes. Yeah. We're seeing a little bit of a return to, oh dear, we kind of upset the apple cart. And so you are seeing career and technical education coming back in schools, but it's, it's like moving the Titanic. It doesn't. So that's issue number one. The second issue is what's going on in the trade businesses, which is kind of twofold. First, there's a lot more funding in terms of infrastructure. We hear this conversation going on in Washington. We hear it in the state of Florida is, we need to work on our infrastructure, roads and bridges and the things in our country that need to be addressed that all require trade labor and trade workers. And so there's a lot more money there, a lot more projects, and that puts a lot more demand on trade industries who are having problems finding workers. And then the second part of what's going on in the trades is that the people who have been a plumber, let's say, or an electrician for many years, are getting older and they're retiring. So about half of trade workers are 50 and older right now. And, they want to enjoy their RVs and their vacation homes and take retirement. So we have the issue of young people not going into trade industries. And then, of course, the people who are aging out. So that's the second part of the triangle. And the third part of the triangle is the mentality of young people these days, which we hear about quite a bit in terms of millennials and Gen Z and their particular mentality. And so the third part of the conversation is how do you talk to young people about the careers in the trades and how do we strike that conversation that's interesting to them and spoken in their own language and really appeals to them? Because right now, between the millennials and Generation Z, that's about 75% of our workforce. So we need to start engaging with them and talking to them about careers in the trades.
Going back to the guys that are retiring, and I know that they have so much wisdom, and I've heard some of these guys, whether they're architects or in the other fields, literally kind of worried when they look over the shoulder and they see who's coming up. And maybe some of the standards have shifted or whatever it is that they are just saying, how is this really going to happen? And how is the baton getting handed over? How are you finding that happening?
Yeah, so unfortunately, or fortunately, I should say, the people who own trade industries that I work with are changing their perspective on what they have to do to build their next generation of workers. So because you don't have a pipeline coming out of high school of kids that already know I want to be, in this field, they have to provide, an environment that trains these young people who may have no experience, that engages them from the standpoint of their own language, these two younger generations.
Right.
So understanding that young people love it or hate it, live for the moment right now.
Right. Right.
So,
and they want to be mobile. They want to be mobile.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
The younger generations are really interesting. I've studied a lot of, millennials and Gen Zs and talked to a lot of them and kind of gotten a good perspective. I have a son who's 21 who lives under my roof. So I see all of this. And so it's a different approach to engaging with your workforce now than it used to be. And my trade industries, I work very heavily with them to kind of educate them on how do you engage with these young people, and how do you, once they're on the job, how do you continue to engage with them so that they're excited about their job, looking at this as a career versus just coming to work every day, and willing to grow with the company.
Right. And, once upon a time, and maybe still in other cultures, we had apprenticeships. And that was a whole thing carried in from forever, from millennia in the different countries. So I'm not sure how that whole aspect. And so people who had come to this country and basically built this country from their other countries had that in their wheelhouse. They had that knowledge base. To do that whole internship thing, apprenticeship type of a thing. And how are you finding now? Is that still happening? Or now the other segue to that question is, seems like there are, and rightfully so many certifications. There's a lot of book learning that has to happen with so many of these trades. So how are you finding that context of kind of, again, passing the baton generationally, or to the next Gen Z, and now we have the younger ones even coming up now to, as you said, this is my calling. I really love what this is about. All the while they get to grow their career into something else. So it's about kind of strategically putting all of this together.
Right. Yeah. And as I said, the stars kind of have to align in the three spaces: education, the industry, and our younger people. So the typical path for a young person, and this is a story that's not really being told in high schools, which is what we're working on, is connecting the dots between what the conversation is in high school and middle school, and what the need is in our trade businesses. And so what's not happening in high school and middle school is a conversation about these are career opportunities. And so a typical high school person, if they know anything about plumbing, is going to picture that as somebody going out and plunging your toilet when you have a problem. But the reality of a career in plumbing is that you may be installing, for instance, plumbing fixtures in a new home, or doing piping, or one of our plumbing companies actually did an ice rink and did all of the plumbing underneath the ice. So there's some really interesting opportunities in all of these trade careers. And also there's trade careers that these kids don't even know exist. So that's kind of point number one. In terms of the certification, the training, the apprenticeships, all of the companies that I work with provide all of that. So the other conversation that's not being had in high schools is that you can graduate and then on day one, start as an apprentice in a program, working from the start, getting paid, so collecting a paycheck without any college debt. And in many, many cases, these companies will pay for your training, whether it's on-the-job training or your certifications that you might need through our local, let's say, Palm Beach State, who provides a lot of vocational programs, or a tech school, or in a lot of the industries, they have industry groups that provide training. But typically our trade companies will pay for that. So, the story not being told to young people is, listen, if you're not destined for college and that's not something that you are interested in doing, take a look at all of these different career options where you can start right out of high school, start earning money right away, have no college debt, and get trained on the job, and have a career path that can take you anywhere. Because the beauty of the trade industries is we all need plumbers and electricians, doesn't matter where you live, right. You can go anywhere. So that's very appealing to young people who are typically not going to stay in a corporate setting for 20 years. They're typically going to work for a few years and then probably move to another part of the country, or move to a different area of interest. And that's just the reality of our young people today. But that's the story that we're trying to share with young people, because it's not being shared with them right now.
Well, I love this part because I've got a couple of different thoughts on that. One is you're absolutely right. And when my kids were coming up, my son is now, he's 31, and he is actually technically someone might call a trade type of an industry. He works as a rigger in theater. And that was so his whole path. And my daughter's path, she actually works for an online educational company. But the mantra as a parent was college, 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 and the best one possible, and all the testing, right?
Yeah.
The relentless testing and the SAT scores. Now, as we know, college is amazing. And yet the part that was missing was the notion of, if it's not your path, it's okay.
Right.
It's okay. And here are some other options. And that is, I appreciate that you're saying this. If this is now can be added to the offices of the guidance counselors, especially in high school or even junior high school, to say not to pre-weed people out, the kids, because they're learning and growing every day, but especially by high school, at least to say, here are some options.
Mm-hmm.
Right. As this is what you're finding. And here in South Florida, and I did find that we're lucky here to have magnet programs in charter schools,
Mm-hmm.
which really has broadened the spectrum of what is available to the kids. If it's music or art or theater, and the trades and culinary. Culinary is huge. Hospitality,
Yes.
sports, management. These kids have marine sciences. These kids have a huge spectrum of choices, which is amazing. And I did find, say in Massachusetts, they don't have it. They don't have, not in the same way. So that kind of brings it back to what you're saying is who can have the conversation with the kids and the families to say, these are some other options for you, instead of having the kid feeling, I'm failing this test again, or I'll never get anywhere, or college isn't for me, all of those negative self-talk things.
Yeah. And anybody who has a young person living in their home knows that you as a parent are the dumbest person on the face of the earth. So for me to have the conversation with my son about what he should do career-wise, and for a parent of a high schooler to start telling them, well, you need to do this and you need to do that, it just doesn't resonate, with young people. And most of us were probably like that ourselves when we were in high school. So
that's right.
So there needs to be a different conversation. So what we're doing at Take on Trades is each of the companies that works with us has to identify whether it's a Gen Zer or a millennial who currently works for them in their company on the job. And basically we create video conversations with these young people about their path, how they got to where they got to, what their choices were, and what they like and don't like about their jobs. The important part, because of the way that we're approaching this as talking to young people in schools, the conversation needs to be very authentic, because young people are very adept. They've been raised in a digital world. They understand if you're trying to sell them on something.
That's right. They're very astute. They don't take any crap.
So you need to have an authentic conversation, peer to peer, meaning young people to young people, talking about, hey, this is what it's really like out here. So for instance, we have a kid who, I call them kids, he's 30, who works in air conditioning here in South Florida. He came out of high school, did not want to go to college. He became a bartender. He was doing very well, making good money, but, around 26, thought this isn't really a great career path for me. So he went into the HVAC business and he's doing very well, and he loves it. I have a young guy who's a plumber who thought he wanted to be a nurse, went to nursing school, didn't like it, and became a plumber and really enjoys what he does. So we have authentic young people, local here, who are telling their stories to local high schoolers here about what it's really like. And the idea is just to connect that conversation so that young people in high schools can say, oh, yeah, this is authentic. This is, and I'm going to listen to this person because they're in my peer group. And we have found that conversation goes a lot more smoothly than a conversation with a parent child or a guidance counselor child. It's just a more authentic approach to telling what it's really like to work in these trade industries.
That's very cool. And so again, with two different questions, where I was going to go has to do with how far behind the scenes are these conversations? And I'm thinking of my friend Ray, who has been a senior editor with Scholastic Books. And so he's been in the elementary education field for his 40 years. And so where I'm thinking about is where are the conversations, and are there books in the children's libraries from a young age talking about being a plumber, or talking about, hey, this is what so-and-so does to build in this factory, or to bake a cake, or all of these other ways that the adults can help be that bridge from the get-go of these are your options. Everything from nuclear science and rocket ships and STEM jobs into these are the hands-on, you're a gardener or a farmer. Is that part of what you're seeing from how young of an age within the school systems, perhaps?
Yeah, so it's been interesting working within the school system because,
are they receptive? I think that's my ultimate question. Are the school systems receptive to this conversation?
I will say yes, they are. But
however,
I come from private industry. I ran my own company for 21 years. You can do a lot. You say, hey, we need to go up this hill. We're going to go up this hill. And there's not a lot of barriers except, maybe money and time.
Mm-hmm.
In the education system, there's a lot of check boxes that you have to check, and a lot of paperwork you have to go through, and a lot of approvals. And, right now I'm kind of working my way through that with our local school system here in Palm Beach County. And, everybody has been super receptive to what we're doing and has been very positive about wanting to bring what we're doing into schools. But we have to go through the conduits that, the school district has or individual schools have. And what I've found most challenging and most interesting, and I don't know if this is typical of Palm Beach County or across the nation, but each school kind of works independently. So to have a conversation throughout all high schools is not possible that I know of. Maybe somebody in the school.
So we are today. We get more people listening. Yeah, we have a broaden the conversation. Yeah.
Right. So there's just no conduit to work your way through all the schools. So, I'm kind of talking to individuals who I know are in spaces where they're trying to help kids who are not college bound, and trying to bring into schools an educational piece to, here's a path. What's really interesting about the trades is that all of these kids could actually talk to the owners of companies who largely did not go to college, came out. Some of them don't even have high school degrees or have a GED, and built their own companies and were very successful with it.
Yep. And that's a very important topic. And I'm glad you brought that up, is that is absolutely 100% absolutely true. That again, college degrees are fantastic, but not everybody who is wildly successful has a college degree. And I don't think that's really voiced as loudly as it could. Again, let's cheerlead all of the kids, especially if they're feeling I'm not worthy or my future is not bright unless I'm at that A level and pass these SATs and these things that are not meant for everybody to pass. Here are some real success stories, and you can still do it. You can fly.
Yeah, and you have to, as you touched on earlier, you kind of have to overcome the conversation that we parents have had for many years with our children about going to college and how that's the best path in terms of making good income and having good jobs. So we kind of shot ourselves in the foot when we did that because you really can do. I mean, I have business owners who, as I said, graduated from high school, maybe do not have college degrees, but have, multiple homes. They have vacation homes, they have boats, they have very nice cars, they have RVs. So, the story that these young people can build a career and live a lifestyle without having a college degree by pursuing a career in trades is very real. And to be able to meet these entrepreneurs, these people who just started these companies and built themselves into very successful companies and very successful business owners.
Well, and I think that going back to the good old mom and dad, it is a fear factor. well, if my kid doesn't go to
Sure.
school, they're going to be a couch potato forever. So what is happening is that's not necessarily true either. And maybe some kids are meant to be a couch potato, who knows? But point being is that to be in these industries or to have there's still structure, right? And there's still a reason to get up every day and
Yeah.
to find what lights somebody up, male, female, whoever, whatever their age is, what lights you up, and then go and do that.
Mhm.
And then if you find that morphs into something else, cool. If you find that you're meant to have your own business, even better.
Yeah.
So these are all these really amazing stepping stones. And that mom and dad, give yourself a break. Your kid is not going to be a couch potato forever. Maybe they're a little bit of a potato because they're so overwhelmed with these messages of
Sure.
too much. It becomes overwhelming sometimes.
Well, I think I often tell my son, like, I would not want to be a kid these days. There's so many things that they're facing that we never faced.
And the distractions. Yes. Yeah.
And, you bring up these kind of magnet programs that are in schools, which actually start very young. So in middle school, you're putting your kid in a pre-med program, and who knows?
And who knows,
They're
right?
going to want to be a doctor.
Right.
So I think we try to lay out these career paths when, in my opinion, what we should be doing is exposing our young people to a lot of different career paths and helping them decide what is right for them and what is not. And recognizing that, a lot of us have picked career paths that then have changed over time. And, you're not tied to being in this career. You can always take a look later on and make a career choice and move to something else. So,
right.
When my son graduated high school during COVID, he went to college for a year. He hated it. He came home and I said, well, you either work or you go to school. And so,
right. Again, with the structure of something, right? The structure of something for sure.
Right. And so I sent him out with a number of my different trade owners, different careers. And he was up on a condo on Palm Beach, 12-story condo, installing a new AC unit. And he said, this is not for me, but it's really cool. He went to work for a company that does, IT support and replaces phone screens and that didn't work out. And then eventually he went to work for another trade company that I work with that does high-end window treatments and upholstery. And he was in, the Ritz-Carlton installing draperies and things. After a year, he said, I think I'm going to go back to school. But that was his choice. He had been exposed to different careers, and now he's kind of more focused on what he wants to do.
Well, but every little thing every day is a stepping stone and a learning experience. So that's really fantastic. The other one more piece to tap into is, and especially the show is international and throughout the whole United States, thinking again about I guess people come from many countries, and we have the different visas for different industries that they have to. Hospitality is huge. They don't have the people here. So they are recruiting people from other countries to come in to the United States. How might you be able to help be one of these bridges, all pun intended? We need bridge builders and street builders and all that. Be that kind of conduit. What would you say to the national and international audience of business owners and people listening that might want to come and reboot their own careers and launch something fresh?
Yeah, I think the conversation is, I don't like to get into the politics of immigration.
No, we don't even have to. This is really it's such a personal journey.
Sure.
And that you are a connector from, as you said, connecting the dots. You are connecting people to what they might be feeling in their heart and soul or wondering about for themselves and how to make that bridge for a better life.
Yeah, I think what people need to realize is that this is a huge issue.
Yeah.
89% of contractors report that they can't find labor. So that's the majority of contractors in the US. And how that translates to you and me is that in project delays. So if you put a deposit on a condominium that you want to live on the beach, chances are, and you hear this conversation all the time, well, they're telling me 9 months, but it's really going to be.
It's really a lot longer and 3 times more expensive. And
exactly.
Yeah.
So it affects all of us. So we would need to recognize that, the conduit to whether they're young people in high schools or they're people coming from other countries, there needs to be a conduit to getting these people into these industries. And a little bit of the hurdle is talking to the owners of these companies, because they're my age. I don't mind saying I'm 56 years old. Like,
I got to be 60. It's awesome. Right. It's fantastic.
These people are my age. They're in their 60s. They're possibly in their 70s.
Yeah.
And, they've been running a business a certain way for a long time. And I get that because I was a business owner. However, in order to build this conduit, you're going to have to change. Like, you're going to have to take a look at how you better engage with young people, how you better engage them on the job, how you keep your workers happy. And keep them coming back and adding more. And then in terms of, the immigration piece, like, what is the conduit? Because we're not going to solve this problem 100% by opening the conversation between young people in U.S. high schools and that pathway.
Right.
You need to solve the problem in a broader spectrum. And, I'm not quite tackling that yet.
Right. I get it.
But when I show people the numbers of, I think it's 440,000 trade workers are needed next year.
Wow.
They're just enormous. And, there's no conduit or very little conduit right now for how we're going to fulfill those jobs.
Well, it sounds like nothing but huge opportunity, and in the best way. You fulfill somebody else's career path, which then fulfills these things that need to happen. And that's a win-win. I'm all about the win-win all around for everybody. So do you have, I know that one more little topic that we're going to be talking about, but on your Take on Trades company, is what else would you like people to know about that, or how to contact you about this?
Yes, we have a website. It's takeontrades.com. Has a lot of the information that I shared in terms of the statistics of what's going on, gives you a history of that if you're interested. And a lot of videos on, what's happening in the trades and what the response has been. And then, I'm always looking for companies who want to recruit and want to recruit in a new world, and want to try to connect the dots with young people and those in the schools. And, anybody in education would be a wonderful connection for me to help me navigate that as well.
That's huge. And I loved what you said earlier and what you're saying now too about we have the wisdom, those of us in a certain age, and if we've run our businesses or done things in a certain way, now we have the next generation who wants to also impart their wisdom, because they're here to teach us as well. And so how to have those conversations. And you mentioned something about that, is that how do you speak their language, each other's language, how do you speak that language? Exactly. So I really appreciate that. And reach out to Valerie for this. Now, though, one more thing that you and I will have an entirely separate show about, but I did want to make mention that you also have a nonprofit and you're author of a beautiful book. So tell us about that before we sign off here, and that will lead us into another show.
Sure. So I shouldn't say most, a lot of nonprofit work, a lot of charitable work comes from a personal experience. My personal experience was I lost my husband in 2009. He died suddenly, and he left me a widow at 42. My son was 7. So I personally experienced this grief journey and found it very challenging, as most people do, and particularly as a mother raising a son in grief. So shortly, a few years after my husband died, I started a charity called Pandora's Kids to help children in grief and connect the dots between how we support young people who are grieving and their parents as well, or their caretakers. So I've been working that for about 10 years now. And it's been a very interesting journey. And I also wrote a book about the year after the death of my husband. It's called This Side of Heaven, and just kind of tells the story of what it's like in the year following the death of a spouse and trying to raise a child during that grief period.
Wow, beautiful and harrowing and beautiful and all of the adjectives. That's really great. And Pandora's, what's it called?
Pandora's Kids.
Pandora's Kids. That we, again, you and I will have a whole separate show about this because this is
Wonderful. I appreciate it.
It's beautiful. And I'm thinking of some kiddos who are grandkids of their poppy who just passed away. And
Sure.
so, the ripple effects and how to, again, it's all about conversation and how to speak to the young people and their adult caregivers along the way, along all these journeys.
Yes, absolutely. So
Absolutely. So we'll have you back again, Valerie.
I appreciate it.
So thank you so much for being here. And we might as well put the plug for that. Where do we find the nonprofit if somebody wants to tap in before we have our show?
Yeah, pandoraskids.org is the website. A lot of good information, a lot of good resources if you're going through a grief experience, and a lot of help for families and children.
Perfect. Beautiful. Valerie, thank you again.
Thank you, Heather. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. And thanks everybody for listening. Please be sure to like, review, follow, and share this podcast. And if you want to be part of the conversation, which this one is extraordinary, please let's talk about these very topics. Please send emails to podcast@lastingconversations.com and follow us on Facebook at Lasting Conversations. This is Lasting Conversations. We get to the heart of everything.